Good evening, and welcome. Tonight we delve into a profoundly pertinent and often polarizing topic. How should society respond to drug addiction? Should the primary approach be rooted in rehabilitation and support, viewing addiction as a public health crisis? Or does the imperative of criminal justice and public safety demand punitive measures remain central? We are navigating the complex intersection of public health, individual rights, criminal justice, and the overall well-being of our communities. Joining us to explore these divergent perspectives are two distinguished guests. Mr. Samuel Jones, a dedicated social worker and addiction specialist, who advocates strongly for a health-focused approach, and Ms. Isabella Rossi, a former prosecutor and current policy advisor who brings extensive experience from the criminal justice system and argues for a framework incorporating legal accountability. The central question before us is stark. Should our primary response to drug addiction prioritize therapeutic intervention over punitive measures, or is a blend of both essential? Mr. Jones, perhaps you would begin with your opening statement.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. I contend unequivocally that our societal response to drug addiction must fundamentally shift towards prioritizing rehabilitation, support, and comprehensive health care. Addiction is not a moral failing or a deficit of willpower. It is a chronic, relapsing health condition, deeply rooted in neurobiological processes. Scientific consensus recognizes addiction as a disease that significantly alters brain structure and function, particularly impacting areas responsible for judgment, decision-making, learning, memory, and crucially, behavioral control. To treat individuals grappling with this complex condition primarily through a punitive lens is not only ineffective, but fundamentally misunderstands the nature of the illness. For decades, we have pursued a war on drugs strategy, relying heavily on arrests, prosecution, and incarceration. The outcomes of this punitive paradigm are demonstrably poor. We see exorbitant financial costs associated with policing and incarceration, leading to severely overcrowded correctional facilities. Furthermore, this approach has disproportionately impacted marginalized communities, exacerbating existing social inequalities. Crucially, recidivism rates for drug-related offenses remain stubbornly high. Why? Because incarceration rarely addresses the underlying neurobiological and psychosocial factors driving addiction. We are merely cycling individuals through a costly system without fostering genuine recovery. Conversely, the evidence supporting the efficacy of treatment is robust. A spectrum of evidence-based modalities exists, including medication-assisted treatment, MAT, which stabilizes brain chemistry and reduces cravings, alongside psychosocial therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, that equip individuals with coping skills. Harm reduction strategies, such as needle exchange programs and supervised consumption sites, also play a vital role in mitigating risks and connecting individuals with care. Recovery is not just a possibility, it is an achievable outcome when appropriate, sustained support is provided. From a pragmatic standpoint, investing in comprehensive treatment and support services is demonstrably more cost-effective in the long term. A thorough cost-benefit analysis reveals significant savings. These savings stem from reduced healthcare expenditures associated with untreated addiction, decreased crime rates, lower burdens on the justice system, and increased economic productivity as individuals regain stability and re-enter the workforce. Therefore, I advocate for a decisive paradigm shift. We must move away from a predominantly punitive response towards a public health imperative grounded in scientific evidence, compassion, and a fundamental respect for human rights. Treating addiction as a health issue is not merely altruistic. It is the most rational and effective path forward.
Dr. Reed, thank you. Mr. Jones presents a compelling case from a public health perspective. However, I believe that completely abandoning the framework of criminal justice oversight in favor of a purely therapeutic model is both unrealistic and potentially detrimental to public safety. While I readily acknowledge the complex health dimensions of addiction that Mr. Jones has articulated, we cannot ignore the tangible impact that drug use and the activities surrounding it have on communities. There is an undeniable nexus between substance addiction and other forms of criminal activity, ranging from property crimes like theft and burglary, often committed to fund drug habits, to more serious offenses including violence and the significant danger posed by driving under the influence. The criminal justice system has a fundamental responsibility to protect citizens from harm and to address the grievances of victims whose lives have been adversely affected by these associated crimes. A purely health-based approach risks minimizing or overlooking this crucial aspect. Furthermore, the principle of deterrence, however imperfect, remains a cornerstone of our legal system. Criminal sanctions serve not only as specific deterrents for the individual offender, but also as general deterrents, reinforcing societal norms against harmful behaviors. While addiction certainly influences behavior, the notion of personal accountability cannot be entirely jettisoned. Individuals must still bear a measure of responsibility for actions that violate the law and harm others, regardless of underlying conditions. Another critical point concerns the practical limitations of relying solely on voluntary treatment systems. While many individuals do seek help willingly, severe addiction often impairs insight and diminishes motivation. A significant cohort of individuals struggling with substance use disorders may lack the self-awareness or internal drive to engage in or adhere to treatment protocols without some form of external leverage or structured intervention. This is where the criminal justice system can, paradoxically, play a constructive role. Mechanisms like drug courts, pre-trial diversion programs linked to mandatory treatment, or probation conditions requiring substance abuse counseling can serve as powerful catalysts. These aren't purely punitive measures. They represent structured interventions designed to compel resistant individuals towards the help they need, within a framework that simultaneously upholds legal accountability. Therefore, I advocate not for the status quo of simplistic incarceration, but for a balanced, pragmatic approach. This approach must intelligently integrate robust treatment opportunities within a necessary framework of legal accountability and public safety considerations. Replacing one system entirely with the other would be a profound misstep.
Thank you both for those comprehensive opening statements. Mr. Jones, Ms. Rossi raises a critical point about public safety and associated crimes. How does a purely health-based approach adequately address situations where an individual's addiction leads to direct harm against others, such as theft or assault?
That's a crucial question, Dr. Reed. Firstly, it's imperative to understand that treating the root cause, the addiction itself, is the most effective long-term strategy for enhancing public safety. Punishing the behavior without addressing the underlying compulsion often leads to a cycle of offending. By providing comprehensive treatment, we reduce the likelihood of relapse and, consequently, addiction-driven crime. For instances where harm has occurred, the response shouldn't be mutually exclusive with treatment. We can utilize diversion programs that mandate treatment instead of incarceration for certain offenses. Furthermore, restorative justice models can be employed, focusing on repairing harm and addressing victim needs while still guiding the individual towards recovery. It's about creating sustainable solutions that address both accountability and the health condition driving the behavior, rather than relying on punitive measures that have proven ineffective in the long run.
Ms. Rossi, Mr. Jones argues that treating the addiction is the key to long-term safety. However, doesn't the persistently high recidivism rate among those processed through the traditional criminal justice system, even with some access to treatment, suggest that punishment without truly effective, comprehensive rehabilitation is ultimately failing to protect the public?
The high recidivism rates certainly highlight deficiencies, Dr. Reed, but I wouldn't attribute them solely to the failure of punishment itself. Often, the issue lies in the quality, duration, and integration of treatment offered within or after the justice system involvement. While long-term treatment success is the ideal, immediate public safety concerns cannot always wait. There must be consequences for criminal acts that victimize others, providing immediate incapacitation where necessary, and reinforcing societal boundaries. Moreover, Mr. Jones speaks of comprehensive treatment, but we must confront the practical realities of scalability and funding. Providing high-quality, intensive, wraparound care to every individual who needs it, purely on a voluntary basis and without the leverage of court oversight, presents immense logistical and financial challenges that cannot be understated. The justice system, particularly through specialized courts, can provide the necessary structure and supervision to ensure compliance with treatment, which might otherwise be lacking.
Mr. Jones, any brief response to the concerns about scalability and the potential necessity of court leverage for treatment compliance?
The scalability argument often overlooks the immense cost of the current punitive system. Reallocating even a fraction of the funds spent on arrests, trials, and incarceration towards treatment infrastructure would dramatically increase capacity. While court leverage can seem effective superficially, coercion can undermine the therapeutic alliance crucial for long-term recovery. Motivation fostered through compassionate, accessible care is ultimately more sustainable.
Ms. Rossi, a quick reaction to the idea that reallocated funds could solve the scalability issue?
Reallocation is easier proposed than implemented, facing political hurdles and immediate budget demands. Furthermore, it doesn't negate the fact that some individuals, due to the severity of their condition, require structured, mandated intervention to even begin the recovery process. Public support might also wane without perceived consequences for related crime.
Let's broaden the discussion slightly. Considering the finite nature of public resources, where do you believe the bulk of funding should be directed? Towards strengthening law enforcement and correctional facilities, or towards building a more robust treatment and support infrastructure? Ms. Rossi, your perspective on resource allocation?
It requires a judicious balance, not an either-or proposition. We certainly need to invest more in effective treatment, particularly within specialized systems like drug courts or probation services that blend judicial supervision with treatment mandates. However, completely defunding enforcement or correctional oversight related to drug-driven crime would be irresponsible from a public safety standpoint. We must also consider public perception. A perceived lack of consequences could erode public trust and support for any approach. We also need to be cautious about directly transposing models from other countries, like Portugal's decriminalization, without accounting for significant differences in socio-cultural context, population density, existing social safety nets, and the specific substances prevalent.
Mr. Jones, your thoughts on resource priorities and lessons from international examples?
I advocate strongly for a significant resource reallocation from the costly, ineffective penal system towards public health infrastructure. The long-term societal benefits, reduced crime, improved health outcomes, increased productivity, far outweigh the short-term costs. While no system is a panacea, models like Portugal's demonstrate the potential benefits of decriminalizing possession for personal use. It allows police resources to focus on disrupting large-scale trafficking and more serious crime, reduces the stigma that prevents people from seeking help, and encourages entry into treatment. It doesn't mean legalizing drugs or abandoning consequences for related harms, but rather shifting the primary response for possession and use away from the criminal justice system towards health and social services.
This brings us to the definition of support. Beyond clinical treatment, what other elements are crucial for sustained recovery, and how do they fit into your respective models?
Holistic support is paramount. This includes stable housing, access to education and vocational training, employment assistance, peer support networks, and integrated care for co-occurring mental health conditions. A public health approach inherently incorporates these social determinants of health, recognizing that recovery happens within a community context, not just a clinic. Funding must encompass these wraparound services.
Ms. Rossi, how does the integrated model you propose incorporate these broader support needs?
These support services are undeniably crucial, and effective programs integrated with the justice system, like well-resourced drug courts or intensive probation programs, do connect individuals with housing, job training, and mental health care. The advantage of incorporating them within a structured legal framework is enhanced coordination and accountability, ensuring individuals follow through with accessing these vital resources as part of their mandated recovery plan. It provides a scaffold that purely voluntary systems may lack for the most challenging cases.
We are nearing the end of our discussion. I'd like to ask each of you for a brief closing statement summarizing your core position. Mr. Jones, please proceed.
My core argument remains straightforward. Addiction is fundamentally a health issue, and it demands a primary healthcare response. Decades of prioritizing punishment have yielded immense costs, social damage, and poor outcomes. The evidence clearly demonstrates the efficacy and cost-effectiveness of comprehensive treatment and robust support systems. It's time to fully embrace a more humane, evidence-based national strategy. This strategy must focus on recovery, harm reduction, and the successful reintegration of individuals into society, moving beyond the failed punitive status quo towards a recovery-oriented system of care.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Ms. Rossi, your closing statement?
While the need for better treatment is clear, the paramount importance of public safety and personal accountability cannot be disregarded. A complete removal of criminal justice oversight for drug-related behavior and its consequences is untenable. Treatment is indeed vital, but experience suggests it is often most effective, particularly for resistant individuals, when integrated with some form of legal oversight or structured consequences. Punishment and support are not necessarily mutually exclusive. Therefore, I advocate for a balanced, realistic framework that safeguards communities by maintaining legal accountability while simultaneously expanding access to effective treatment pathways, often leveraged through the justice system itself.
Thank you both, Mr. Jones and Ms. Rossi, for your insightful contributions and for illuminating the nuances of this incredibly multifaceted challenge. It's evident that finding the optimal balance between compassion, treatment efficacy, personal responsibility, and the imperative of public safety remains a complex task for policymakers and society alike.